Happy Sabbath. It is truly a blessing to be standing here before you. I have the privilege of being able to present the bread of life, the light from God. I ask for His grace today to be able to speak through me the truth that He has imparted to us in His Word. So, I'd like to begin today with a question. It's a question that has been asked by man throughout the ages. Why does God allow suffering? And does anyone here know the answer why? If so, please, feel free. You can speak your mind. Satan. Okay, that is an answer. That's fair. Sister Valika? This is true. So, the title of today's lesson aims to explore the book of Job, to ask ourselves, to rephrase the question, from why to who? We're going to be going through the book of Job in parts. We're going to explore the book. If you'd like to follow along, if you have a physical Bible, feel free. I will have verses here and there, but I tend to find that sometimes as you're reading along, especially with Job, there is a lot of vivid imagery and wonderful language that is used, and you might find yourself caught, encapsulated in reading, and it's always good to read the Bible. So, let us begin with who was Job. In the very first chapter, in Job we're introduced with scenery. We're presented with God in heaven, in a court, and he is said to those that are present in the court, he establishes Job as a man who was perfect and upright. In Job chapter 1 verse 8 it reads, "And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil." Escheweth meaning one that puts himself aside, avoids it at all cost. So he presents Job as this perfect and upright man, right from the very get-go. So, from the very first page, from this verse here, in the theme of Job, we'll explore this later, but Job is said to be blameless. He is perfect. The excuse, why does God let suffering, or why do bad things happen to those who are good? From the very first introduction, we see it's not because Job is blamed. It's not because he deserves his suffering. That's from God's own testimony. In this court, Satan is the accuser. And in the Hebrew language, it's interesting. You can look it up yourself. It's the Satan, or in their language, he is the accuser, the opposed. And he accuses God and says, "Doth Job fear God for naught? But put forth thine hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face." He accuses God that Job's faith in him is laid in selfish foundations. It isn't so much as I have faith in God. It's because God has blessed me, I will do what's right. If God took away my blessings, Satan accuses Job and God to say that his faith would become naught. He wouldn't have the same faith in God. It's only because he's blessed that he has faith in God. This is Satan's accusation. And God disagrees. Now, the conflict in Job obviously is one of extreme torment, of extreme pain. Many of us who have read the chapters most likely read of the different trials and tribulations that Job suffers. These are great. He loses all that he has. He loses his loved ones. He loses all that he has, all that he cares for, all that cares for him, all his loved ones. And he goes through extreme torment. And we understand that that God has given Satan strict instructions in his test. He he acknowledges Satan's accusation and he fights it. It becomes an unseen battle between God and Satan. The accusation is to be proven wrong, and God chooses Job as his vessel to vindicate for true faith. So God puts a condition: do not touch Job, but everything else is at your mercy. So Job suffers, and we're going to explore his lament in the ways that he responds to his suffering. The suffering itself, I encourage you to read, but the way we're going to be talking about his attitude today, how he responds to that suffering. Because much like myself and likely all of us in this room, we don't have control of what happens in our lives, but we do have control of how we respond to what happens. So let's talk about the different ways that Job struggles with his circumstances and his approaches and his questions to what has occurred. The very first theme is despair. This is Job's initial response. We read in Job, after his suffering, after Satan, the tormentor, takes away all that he has, his sons, his daughters, his belongings, his possessions, his wealth, everything that he has is ripped away from him, and he becomes naught of a man with nothing to show for himself. He's lost everything he's ever cared for. Keeping in mind, he has done no wrong. He is innocent. He is a perfect and an upright man. He is righteous. And he's presented in this situation, he's presented with all of this suffering, and he doesn't know how to respond. His very first response is despair. It reads in chapter 3, verse 3, "Let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a man-child conceived." He curses the day he was born. He does not curse God. He reflects internally. Not reflects internally, but rather he self-harms mentally. He hurts himself. He curses the day he was born. Chapter 3, verse 11, "Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter in soul, which long for death, but it cometh not, and dig for it more than for hid treasures." Job is begging for death. He has suffered so immensely, he curses the day he was born, and he begs that he'd never existed in the first place. So there is a key text within Ellen G. White's writings, The Ministry of Healing. I've taken a few components. There are many parallels, but throughout the Bible for how people react to suffering. And Job's initial response is one of extreme sorrow in God's eyes. And it's one that we can empathize with. But Ellen G. White writes in The Ministry of Healing, page 159. I don't believe I have it, but if those of us who are following, maybe on our phones, if we have it, page 159 in section 23. "Jesus wept, though he was the Son of God. He had taken human nature upon him, and he was moved by human sorrow. His tender, pitying heart is ever awakened to sympathy with the afflicted. We have not a high priest who cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities. He who wept at the grave of Lazarus and sympathized with the bereaved mother of 9 is today touched with the feeling of his people's sorrows." Job's first response isn't a theological statement. It isn't of reason. It's a scream. It's a scream of despair, of pain. This is the raw honesty that God, in the later chapters, would come to respect. But he doesn't strike him down. He doesn't respond. just yet. And Job laments. Now, going on, in this lament, we see his wife. I believe 7 days he laments in the same way with despair. And his wife also says to him, and this is the very first trap. I believe this is, we'll explore this, but this is Satan. This is Satan, how he misrepresents or how he attacks us based on how we respond to suffering. This is how Satan can influence us. This is his wife, and she says, "Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Do you still trust God even so? Why do you blame yourself? Curse God and die." That's what she says. An incredibly impactful but horrible statement. She asks him to give up, essentially. But Job doesn't. He doesn't give up. He continues, "Even struggling so," and we go on. Now, that was chapter 3 and so forth. Job's despair is documented in detail. But then he understands a bit more, and he has more time in his grief, and he begins to get counsel from friends. But in doing so, he also reflects more on the purpose, the reason behind his suffering. Job knows himself to be innocent. He doesn't find fault to be the reason for his suffering. But even so, he still wants to know why. He wants to know why. And so he reasons. And the second way that Job processes this purpose, this reason, his suffering, is he feels hunted by God. He feels and is truly agonizing. It says here in Job chapter 6 verse 4, "For the arrows of the Almighty are within me, the poison whereof drinketh up my spirit. The terror of God do set themselves in array against me." He is afraid that God, his most beloved friend, his creator, his Father in heaven above, has turned against him. What a terrifying feeling. He is afraid. He is petrified. In chapter 7, verse 17 to 18, it says, "What is man that thou shouldest magnify him, and that thou shouldest set thine heart upon him, and that thou shouldest visit him every morning and try him every moment?" He's basically saying, "Lord, why? Why every moment, why? Why are you pursuing me? Why do I feel this sense of being hunted every moment?" Setting himself just on Job, he doesn't understand why, and he is scared. In chapter 10, verse 16 and 17, it reads, For it increaseth, thou huntest me as a fierce lion, and again thou showest thyself marvelous upon me. Thou renewest thy witnesses against me. So he's depicting the Lord as one who has turned against him, hunting him. And even so, he still does not know why. But this is his struggle. We are given some insight as well from the testimonies for the church. We are given insight into these moments of weakness where we are placed in the shadow of the valley of the shadow and death. When we are placed in these situations, we sometimes can be deceived, and we can sometimes be tempted to accuse God or even view him as the accuser or the opposed, the enemy, which is not the right thing to do. In these times of trial, we read, God brings his people to straight places that they may, or to dire straits, This is not straight as in straight and narrow, the good way. This is straight as in those of trial, the rocky path. God brings his people to straight places that they may learn to trust in a power higher than their own. He would teach them that they are not to rely upon human wisdom, but upon their God. When we are brought into straight places, when the soul is tried and afflicted, then is the time for us to have closer fellowship with Christ. The Lord sometimes brings men into hard places to show them their own weakness. Now, this is the beginning of the third theme of Job's response to his suffering. In this trial, in this tribulation, could Job have been brought into this suffering because he has a weakness and God is putting him through a trial to strengthen his character or to prepare him or any these sorts of thoughts? Before we do so, we read also in Job that there was accusations made by his friends after his wife had initially told him to curse God and die. There was 3 friends that came to him to counsel him. Now, his 3 friends also know God, and they believe God to be just. God is just. He's right. And Job is suffering. Therefore, their argument is, if God is always right and he governs the world as a just, almighty Father, his reasoning, his judgment is perfect. If Job is suffering, Job has done something wrong. The argument, the implication, and the effect, or the result. They say in Job chapter 4:7, this is his 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Remember, I pray thee, whoever perished being innocent, or where were the righteous cut off? They essentially say, who was ever innocent that perished? Or who was the righteous? Or when were they cut off? They're accusing him of not being innocent or righteous. And in Job, they ask him, please, Job, come clean, whatever you have sinned. And even so, they accuse his sons and his daughters as they are dead in the grave. Perhaps they may have been the sinners. Please, answer for them or do so. This blame they place on Job in his grief, they add guilt to work it. In the Great Controversy on page 589, it reads, "It is Satan's constant effort to misrepresent the character of God, the nature of sin, and the real issues at stake in the Great Controversy." In their voice of blame, they misrepresent God's intentions. This suffering isn't caused, it's not so simple as this and this equal this. It's not God is just and Job is suffering, therefore Job is not innocent. And Satan is using this argument, this blame, and this perfect analogy that they believe is logical. They believe it to be true, and Satan is using it to try and manipulate Job or to misrepresent the character of God, as it says here. And we see this to be wrong later. We will come to that. But we still see Job is still struggling. He denies the counsel from his friends. He knows himself to be innocent. He knows it. He's 100% certain. And so he asks in chapter 10, verse 2, "I will say unto God, do not condemn me. Show me wherefore thou contendest with me." He asks him for an answer. He asks to reason with him. He asks to plead his case. Show him where he has gone wrong, because he doesn't know. Do not condemn me. He defends himself. Even so, he denies the counsel from his 3 friends. So here comes the third response. In Job's despair, he denies the option to give up. He doesn't take that path. He also denies the temptation to give in to falling for the counsel of his three friends. He denies the temptation to say, I have sinned, when he hasn't. Or he can blame it on somebody else, or his sons and daughters they have accused. He can reason with that. No, he stands as an upright man, a righteous man, and he defends himself. And he wants to know why. Why is his suffering so severe? Why has God punished him? Or not so much why has God punished him, but just why. Why is he going through all of this? In chapter 9, verse 32 and 33, we read, "For he is not a man as I am," he's referring to God here, "that I should answer him, and we should come together in judgment. Neither is there any daysman," which is any mediator, middleman, any man betwixt us, "that might lay his hand upon us both." He is essentially saying, there is no man that can come as a mediator between me and God. There is no one of equal that can put us side by side and judge us fairly, because God is the mediator. He is the judge. So he goes on in chapter 23, verse 3 to 5, "Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would order my cause before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would know the words which he would answer me, and understand what he would say unto me." He is begging for an audience, not begging, he is dreaming of this audience. Not dreaming. The right word would be pleading. He's pleading for an audience with the king, with the judge, to plead his case. He is innocent. Even the Lord has said so. In chapter 1, verse 8, he says he is an upright and perfect man. He has done no wrong, and he asks that he can plead his case with the Lord, the judge. And we see here as well in Job chapter 13:3, "Surely I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to reason with God. But even so, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. But I will maintain mine own ways before him." Even so, this is the key verse. This is a critical part of Job. And this is, I believe, the takeaway that we should take away. One of the key takeaways we should take from the book of Job. It's in this position where Job doesn't know why he's suffering. He doesn't understand the reason, the purpose, why God has let him go through this. He still puts his faith in God. He still trusts him. "Though he slay me," even if God was hunting Job, even if he were to slay him, "I would still trust in him," he says. "I will maintain mine own ways before him as an upright and perfect man." This is the firmness. This is the cling to faith. He says in chapter 13, verse 15 and 16, "He also shall be my salvation." This is directly after. "Even if he should kill me, I will still trust him, because he also shall be my salvation. For an hypocrite shall not come before him. For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth." Now this we will come to see pleases God. This is the response that God is happy to hear. This is one that I believe is the takeaway of Job. And we'll explore that a bit more. However, we will then continue on to what we see is a glimmer of hope. We've had the counsel of two groups so far that come to Job in this book. We have the counsel of his wife. This is not good counsel. We have the counsel of the three friends. And while seemingly fair, it's logical to place blame because they believe God to be just and Job to be somehow, he's guilty somehow. These aren't true for Job's circumstance. This isn't the reason for his suffering. But here we come with a glimpse of truth, a glimmer of hope. A young man speaks up. After the three friends have spoken, he speaks up. As he was younger, he waited for them to finish. His name Elihu, and he speaks with intense vigor. And this is in chapters, I believe, 31 onwards, if you'd like to read it. He stands up and he speaks with firm confidence, as if he was speaking as a man touched by God. And he says, and he basically tells Job, he says, chapter 33, verse 14, "For God speaketh once, yea twice, yet man perceiveth it not. Then he openeth the ears of men, and sealeth their instructions," or their instruction. In chapter 36:10, "He openeth also their ear to discipline, and commandeth that they return from iniquity, from sin." And in chapter 36, he says, "Behold, God exalteth by his power. Who teaches like him?" He's saying in these verses and in these chapters, he's saying that God is testing Job. He is giving him a trial to strengthen him. And we read before in Ellen G. White, in the Ministry of Healing, she says, we are put in these positions of, these dire straits, these positions of trial, this is where we should grow closer to God. These are our times to increase that connection, to grow in character. And this young man Elihu gives this counsel to Job, seeing that his friends have failed to comfort Job in his lament, in his struggle to understand the purpose of why he's suffering. They have failed to comfort him, and this young man tries his best to give his advice. And this glimmer of truth. We see this to be truth, and although this is not the case for Job, necessarily, we do see this to be the truth. His reasoning for why God lets people suffer has truth. In the Ministry of Healing, we read on page 471, "Our Heavenly Father is never unmindful of those whom sorrow has touched. The trials that task our faith most severely and make it seem that God has forsaken us are to lead us closer to Him." Even the trials that have tested us so severely as to bring us into positions where we may even question God, these are the very trials that should bring us closer to Him. These are the opportunities for us to increase our connection with God, it says here. Now, everything we've just discussed, even this glimmer of truth, this is still not the reason why God has let Job suffer. None of these are the reason why. In chapter 1, we found out that in this council in heaven, this court, Satan has accused God. And God is using Job. He has chosen him as his vessel to prove that faith is selfless. Now, in the later parts of Job, in chapter 38 to 41, this is where, after we've heard the counsel of man, we hear the voice of God. This is God's response to Job. He finally responds to his cries. After 37 chapters of pure torment, questioning, struggling, wrestling for the truth, Job does not know why he is suffering. He is pondering why, puzzled. God finally responds to his outcries, and he comes down not with an answer. It says here, chapter 38, verse 1 to 3, "Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer me." I've used the concordance to decipher the Old English or the translated Hebrew, the etymology a little bit more. He is reproving the other men for their counsel to Job, for why have they given him words without knowledge? Why have they not consulted the wisdom of God or God himself to counsel this man? He reproves them, but also he says, "Job, gird up now thy loins like a man, prepare yourself, for I will question you, demand of thee," meaning question you, "and you will answer." And he goes on. In chapter 38, verse 4 and verse 7, he says, Job, if you'd like, you can read along with me. I personally think this is some of the most interesting scripture in the Bible. This is incredible. But feel free. He reads, "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth, when the morning stars sang together?" He goes on, "Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow? Or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war?" Many things he describes in these chapters, verse 38 all the way to 41. He describes the many intricacies of the cosmos, the universe, all the things at play, nature, the elements, beasts we can't imagine, many different things, secrets. Here he says the treasures of the snow, the treasures of the hail, the clouds, those in the glaciers in the Antarctic, the frozen moons in our galaxies, in all these things. He points to the stars. "Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or canst thou guard Arcturus with his sons?" If anyone wants to search up Arcturus, it's one of the biggest stars in the known universe. It's immensely large, and it burns with immense radiation. Here we see the Lord asking Job, can you organize these stars, place them where they are? Can you direct them? Can you bring forth the seasons, the different years? The Mazzaroth in this case is commonly paralleled with, if people know, the year of the dragon, for example. In Chinese culture, they have the different years, the mosaic, and they have the different years of the animals, and they are related to celestial cycles. The Mazzaroth is commonly paralleled with this. Can you bring forth those years? Can you bring forth those cycles? Can you organize the stars, the constellations, the very known universe? Can you do these things, Job? In education, it says, "Upon all created things is seen the impress of the deity, from the silent stars that traverse their paths of light through space, from the lichen of the rock to the tiniest insect that sports in the sunbeam. Nature testifies of God's exhaustless power, his infinite love." There is creation in everything, and God is talking to Job, asking him, Are you the one who governs creation? Creation, destruction. These are the tools he is working with. He is. And that's all. He's asking Job, hast thou given the horse strength? Hast thou clothed his neck with thunder? And this in the Hebrew etymology means clothed him with the mane, the majestic mane of the horse, the war horse. He describes the horse in its behavior, in its majesty. He mocketh at fear and is not affrighted, neither turneth he back from the sword. He swalloweth the ground with fierceness, and neither believeth he that it is the sound of the trumpet. He's saying, this horse, he mocks fear. He is strong, he is steadfast. He swallows the earth with his strides, and he doesn't get scared of the clacking of his hooves against the earth. Though it sounds like trumpets, he's not afraid. And these things. Now, we're introduced in this chapter to some very interesting creatures. Two creatures God depicts for us, his creations. He says in Job chapter 40, verse 15 and 19, he reads, Behold now behemoth, which I made with thee. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. In that he's saying, the creator of this beast can make his sword to approach unto him is to pierce him with the sword, or only his sword can reach this beast, the one that created him. Only. Behold, he drinketh up a river, and hasteth not. He trusteth that he can draw up Jordan into his mouth. He depicts this beast being able to drink up a river, and the river Jordan in this case. Those of us that know the river Jordan in Egypt or in Israel, sorry. Those of us that know. It's immense, like size, proportion, this beast of immense power. And we're introduced to this horrifying beast of chaos that he describes in chapter 40, in chapter 41. He asks, Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook? Can you fish up the sea, the monster of the sea? The doors of his face, who can open the door of his face? Who can open them? His teeth are terrible round about. The sword of him that layeth at him cannot hold. No sword can hold on this beast. The spear, the dart, nor the habergeon. That's the javelin. He esteemeth iron. He considers iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. He maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. He stirs it up like a pot of ointment when he moves, is the language. None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? This is God speaking. Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine. This immense creature, this terrible, unconquerable beast, the message is breathtaking. God says to Job, the thing representing the greatest chaos and fear imaginable to you is my creature, my creation. I have this beast on a leash. If I am sovereign over this Leviathan, why don't you trust me with your life? How can you not trust me with your life? So, in chapter 40, verse 2, in chapter 40, God speaks to Job and says to him, Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, Shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? Wilt thou, it goes on later to say, wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me that thou mayest be righteous? He asks Job, in knowing all these things, are you the one, if you were there when I laid the foundations of the earth, when I orchestrated all the beauty and the majesty of the universe, I measured the known universe in all of its length. If you know the measurement, say it to me. And he goes on to describe the peacock or the ostrich in its behavior, how it is rough to its young because it is afraid for their survival. The birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, the intricacies of math, physics, all of the concepts that govern our universe, things out of our understanding. He asks Job, if you are all of these things, are you the one that should instruct me? Shall he that contendeth with me instruct me? Or him? Will you be the one to pass on my judgment, to avoid it? Or will you condemn me that you may be right? He says. All of these things. In this revelation, Job is never given the reason for his suffering. He is never told about the conflict in heaven with Satan. Nowhere in Job does God ever tell Job, nowhere in Job does God ever tell Job that his suffering is part of a greater plan, a grander scheme that is happening far away from his eyes, from his knowledge. He never once mentions this battle. But Job, in seeing this revelation that God has shown him, his majesty, his control, his sovereignty, Job surrenders. And he says in chapter 42, you can read along with me. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from thee. It goes on to say, I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. In Job's experience, he knew of God from the hearing of the ear, from the reading, from the word of God. But now he sees. He has seen. God has shown him his majesty. He's taken him through this tour of his creation, of him as the creator, of his majesty, his sovereignty, his glory, everything, his complete and complex control of everything that governs our universe. And he says, who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore have I uttered that I understood not. Things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. Job admits that in his small-mindedness, his suffering, though valid, he doesn't know everything. He cannot understand. He has spoken things that he did not understand fully. He has made baseless claims, accusations. And this is important. This is important. God doesn't reprove him for these things. It's strange because his wrestling, he never once, how should I say, disrespects God. We saw earlier he had doubts and he questions God of his intentions or his doubts, but he still holds faith through it all. And God doesn't reprove him for his questioning. Because he has that faith, he shows that he still believes. He doesn't understand why, but he still believes that God in his majesty will still have a reason, even if he doesn't know why. And God says he's happy with this. It says in verse 7, I don't have it here. If you'd like to read with me in your Bibles, it says, and it was so that after the Lord had spoken these words unto Job, The Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, this is one of the friends, remember, that accused Job of sinning, because the Lord is just, and if the Lord is just and Job is suffering, he must have sinned. My wrath is kindled against thee and against thy two friends, for ye have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job hath. He says, what Job has spoken, is right. And there are lots of things that were not right, Job said in the book, because there's a lot of lamentations, and he cries out to God, and he accuses him of things, and he questions him, and he demands all these things. These aren't right, but here we say what Job has said is right. So, strange. In verse 8 it says, therefore take unto you now 7 bullocks and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering. And my servant Job shall pray for you, for him will I accept. Lest I deal with you after your folly, in that ye have not spoken of me the thing which is right, like my servant Job. And they do so. And the Lord forgives them. He says, turns the captivity away from Job. He ends his suffering. And we go on to read that God blesses him. He blesses him twofold. He blesses him with more than he had in the beginning. Everything that he lost, all the suffering that he had, he is blessed with sons and daughters. He is blessed with his wealth. He is blessed with everything twice as much as he had in the beginning. And it doesn't say that the Lord returned these things unto him. It says he blessed the latter end of Job in his life. So this wasn't an act of what Satan was accusing God of in the first place, which was God is blessing Job and that is the reason for Job's faith. That is why Job trusts God and why he has faith in God. And this last bit, the Lord simply blesses him after this, after Job has shown his resilience in his faith for God, even in his trials and his suffering. That's simply a gift from God, a blessing. And another blessing that is good to highlight is that Job in this book, his suffering is immense. And we as humans, we can also equate these things to experiences in our lives. Some of us have dealt with great suffering, some more so than others. But even so, if we can be like Job and we can resist the temptation to fall into the temptation of Satan, to misrepresent the character of God, if we can resist the temptation to accuse him, to reason, to justify, to find the logical way to navigate, to put God in a box that makes sense, if we can put a purpose behind our suffering that isn't what God intends, that's the work of the enemy. The lesson in Job is simply to trust God in his ways. He is infinitely more powerful than we. He understands more than us. He knows the plan. He knew us before we were born, and he knows where we are after we die. He's the beginning and the end. He's simply everlasting. There is nothing in this universe that is out of his reach. Past, present, future, time, anything. We can put faith and we can put trust in someone that is all-knowing. It's an experience. If you go in the world today, if you want something done, you usually go to an expert in the field because you trust that they know what they're doing. You have faith that whatever they say, they will do. And usually that's backed up by monetary or status or these sorts of things. Some sort of rapport. Now, God, as an expert in all fields, He is the expert. There is nothing that he isn't the creator of. He knows all, and I would put my trust in someone that knows all in their field, and he knows all in every field. So this is the lesson that we take from this. And what a blessing that God chose Job to be the vessel to vindicate that faith isn't a self-serving thing, as Satan accused. If we are to believe that God is righteous and God is just, God gives equally, fairly, he loves all, he is a loving God. We can't come to him with expectations. We can't treat our faith as a transaction, as Satan accused. We come to him with complete and utter humility. We come to him as his creations. We believe and we trust in him because we know that we do not know what happens to us and the reasons why. Even if we don't have the answer, we still believe that he knows what he's doing and there is a purpose. In the whirlwind, while we are in the whirlwind, we don't have to understand the wind. We simply have to trust that God, our Creator, will guide us through. And this is the true answer to the question. Now, the answer is never directly given in the book of Job to the question, why does God allow suffering? Why does God allow good things or bad things to happen to good people? But we do have an answer for, I guess, our response. And we do have an answer for why, I guess. It's given in Proverbs, and we've learned it through this. Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Why does he allow suffering? In the book of Proverbs it reads, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding." The answer isn't something we need. We simply have to trust. And that is faith, and that is the story of Job. So, with that, in closing, let us trust God as Job did. May we go about in our daily lives, even in our suffering, as we studied in Job, even in our suffering. If we may not have the answer, even so, may we still trust God. Amen.